folks, and welcome to this video. In this video I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the buy and sell zone algo trader because the code base has received an enormous amount of attention and thus updates over the past several months. So I'm just going to take some time talking about the new changes and also how we can use this piece of software. Number one, you will notice that the dashboard looks very different. Okay, and this is a result of a lot of the changes that have taken place in the code, one of which is the merging of the supply and demand software and the asset strength histogram into one piece of software. So now we have this piece of software running as the buy and the sell zone algo trader. And the cool thing about this is that we have a dashboard here, and now we actually have very useful information. We can see what zone we are in relative to the asset strength histogram on the monthly chart, the weekly, the daily, and the 4-hour. So we know if we are above the green line or below the red line, and also what the trend is, if the histogram is positive or if it's negative. So here we can see that we are not really in any zone on the monthly chart. So if we look at that, we can see we're probably negative, but we're not incredibly negative. You can just see that we are just negative, which means that, this asset should be drifting low, which it has been doing. Okay, we also have that we have a downtrend, which means we have a negative histogram. We go to the weekly chart, it says there's no zone, but we are also in a downtrend, so the histogram should be negative. Wait for that to update. Yes, we can see that we are looking bearish. Okay, so this is important information. We can see the same information on the daily and the 4-hour. Actually, on the daily chart, it's saying we're in a buy zone. So this probably means that the histogram is lower than the line at the bottom of the chart. Yeah, you can see here. So this means the price of the pound Swiss franc is likely going to see a correction, which we have already started to see. Okay, so this is really interesting information. It's very important to know where you are. So if you're trading on the 4-hour chart exclusively, it's just nice to know where you are relative to the buy and the sell zones on many of the other time frames, the bigger time frames, and what the trend is on these time frames. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the settings. So you bring up the settings simply by clicking on the face here. Okay, and here we can see we have the keys, the product key, the private key. Okay, so the product key is the one that's available in your downloads. This is updated on the first day of every month. The private key is the one that you receive when you signed up, and this value never changes. We have the dashboard, is it enabled, and the location of it. We want it at the top left side of the chart. We have execution in seconds. So I want the algo to run every 5 seconds. I don't want it to run on every tick, because maybe the algorithm wouldn't be done running after each tick, meaning that it would get stuck in a loop, which would be a really bad idea. So 5 seconds is enough. It maybe takes half a second to run. Okay, and so we have 4.5 seconds break before we do the next iteration. This is just to stop it from bogging down the terminal, which is a real pain. We have a flag debug. If you enable this, it shows some extra error messages in the experts tab below here at the bottom of the chart. Okay, then we have the conditions. This is max slippage, max spread. 5, that's really high. You might want to set that to a different value if you should feel so inclined. And we have the risk, and the risk is, it tells the robot a little bit about your risk appetite. And so when it sees that we have 1% allocation, so 0.00, that's 1%, it means that each position that is opened, it will allocate 1% of the account for that position. So if the stop is hit, you will lose precisely 1% of your account balance to that trade. If you win, then you'll win at least that amount. And we have enable profit risk. So this is a new setting. It's been in there for a while, but I've never discussed this. And if you don't know what this is, then I would encourage that you went back and saw the video that I did for FX Street a couple of days ago, a week ago or so, where I discussed the concept of random outcomes of trades. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much depth, but very briefly, if you have a 50% chance of a trade winning, you will notice that the wins and the losses will typically cluster together. So if you get a win, then it's slightly higher probability that the next trade will be a win than a loss. And so when you enable this setting, the robot, it takes the profit from the trade that you just won, it allocates 60% of it to the position size of the next trade plus the initial risk. So it would risk 1.6% on the second trade. And each time the robot has a consecutive win, the number that this value here goes down by 50%, because obviously we're not going to get 60 wins in a row. So each time we experience a win, the probability of the next one being a winner goes down a little bit, and so we reduce the position size. Okay, so after one winner, we load the boat, and after that we slowly start to, actually quite rapidly start to reduce the risk again in anticipation of a loss. Okay, we have lot size. If you want to set static lot sizes, you can do that in here. If it's set to 0, then it will calculate them automatically. Max lot size, if you want to ensure that there's a cap, your lot size is a cap, then you can set that value in here. Pair exposure, so how many trades do we want to take per asset? So euro US dollar, if you set to 1, it'll only ever have one trade open at a time for the euro US dollar, be it a pending order that has not yet filled or a trade that is already filled. Currency exposure, this means that we are going to expose ourselves to one currency in max 5 positions. So let's say we have 2 trades that are open, they're working, and we have 3 that are pending but not yet filled. If they are American dollar denominated in any way, it will not look for any more American dollar trades. It'll say, oh, we've already reached our mass exposure to the American dollar, we don't want to take any more risk or exposure to that currency. Okay, loss mitigation. When this is set to true, it'll make sure that you have not lost more than 2% per day, 5% a week, 10% per month. And if at any time these loss limits, any of the loss limits are reached, it will delete all of the pending orders that you have set. Okay, so this is set to true. This is set to false, then it won't. It'll ignore this. Okay, but it's good to have a loss limit, because if the robot is on the wrong side of a trade, it's nice to know that if we lose 2%, then it just shuts down and it waits for the next day. Then the market has settled a little bit, and then we have another fresh look at the market. We have Quant Settings. This is the asset strength histogram stuff, which you'll recognize from the asset strength histogram and the asset strength version algo trader. But we have mean periods 500, modifier 1.5. This tells the software, the buy and sell zone algo, where to put the green and the red lines, so the buy and the sell zones. We have the fast and the slow readings. So these are exactly the same from the asset strength histogram. Then we have this setting. It's a new one, alert settings. And this is a really important one to have, and I put it there out of frustration because of this. I had some pending limits put on. I was in a place where I was potentially distracted. I was distracted, and during the time that I was being distracted, two trades that I had, pending limits that I had, were both filled. They both went up to plus 10%, and they were both stopped out at 1% each. So I went from the potential of winning 10% that day to losing 2%. Okay, because I was not aware of the fact that my trade was filled. And so this setting is set to true. If any of the orders, the pending limit orders, are filled, it'll start sounding the alarm, meaning get back to the computer, you have work to do. Okay, and I put this in there just to keep me informed of the fact that pending limits were filled, because that was a real bummer. And so I didn't want to repeat that. And then we have this delete pending orders. We have delete all pending. So this is good for example, if you have, let's say, 10 pending orders, they're open, that you did on the previous analysis, but you want to close them all without having to click delete one by one, you can simply set this to true, switch on auto trading, and it'll delete all of the pending limits. Okay, and then you can turn it back to false again. Then we have this setting here, delete pending, it's difficult to read, with loss limits. That means that this should also be set to true. But what this means is that if you have 10 pending orders that are not yet filled and you've already exceeded any of the loss limits, if this is set to true, then it'll delete all of the pending limits to avoid additional losses for that day, that week, or that month. So this is just a really good setting to have enabled. Okay, we have the filters, positive swap only. If this is set to true, then it's only going to trade currencies where the swap is greater than -5. This is kind of a weird setting, but if you in the old days, if you wanted to trade, for example, like have carry trades, like you would buy a high yielding currency and sell a yield or a negative yielding currency like the Australian dollar, Japanese yen, then this setting would have ensured that you would have only bought that and not sold the Australian dollar, Japanese yen. Then you set the value there. Okay, and here we have buy and sell zone only, which is coming in the next release. And what that means is that if this is set to true, then it's only going to trade in line with the rules of how we would traditionally use the asset strength histogram. So if, for example, if this is negative, if the histogram is negative, we're only going to sell. But we're going to stop selling once we start moving below the buy zone line. Okay, and the same applies for here. I mean, here it's only going to sell. We would have bought a little bit there maybe, but selling. Then we started to buy here. Maybe we would have bought here because this went positive. We would have taken this trade. But as soon as this crossed over here, then we only would have started to sell. So we would have taken this trade, only selling. Okay, but we would not buy once price moves above this, because that's just a really bad idea. And so this is coming out in a future release, but I just want to include that in this video. Okay, so this is going to be a really cool setting, because then we're only trading in line with this asset, the underlying asset strength, which is awesome. Okay, we have the stop multiplier and the risk reward. So the stop multiplier, this tells us, okay, let me turn this off and go like this. Okay, so what the stop multiplier is doing, we actually have a trade here. The robot took this trade on another account we sold just here. So the stop multiplier, what it's doing is, it is looking at the size of this area's supply, and it's multiplying its size by the value that we have specified here. Where are we? Boom, boom. Here. Okay, so it's looking at the size of this area, it's multiplying by 2, and the risk reward is going to be 2 to 1. When this is set to 2, that means 2 to 1. So it's going to take 2 times the size of that, which is pretty big, and it's going to say we want the profit at 1 times that, 2 times that. So it'll expect price to go all the way down to the lows here. Will that happen? Likely not, because we are really low and are looking to turn. So we're probably going to continue higher from here. So this trade would not, the likelihood of it working is slightly low. So maybe a more conservative thing to do would be to put it to 1. Okay, and maybe even have the stop multiplier to low. The stop multiplier on this trade was actually 1 to 1, so it's just slightly above. We just missed the stop, and now we're getting close to about a 1 to 1 down here. Okay, so that's what these settings do. Okay, then we have the old and well-known supply and demand settings. We have the risk to reward. So we want price to move at least 2 times the size of this area of supply within 3 periods. So 1, 2, 3, and so this area here was qualified actually on the hourly charts. Let's close this. We'll go here. Let me go like that. Yeah, here. So it's looking for this area. It's actually this area here. It's looking at all of this area of supply here, or a distribution. Okay, and it is looking 2 times the size of that. And it wants price to move away 2 times the size of that within 3 periods. And the reason it's above is because there's a whole lot of distribution here, and so we wouldn't expect price to stop there. We would expect price to go through that, which it did. Okay, and let me explain that a little bit better. Okay, I'll come to that in just a second. Here, okay, it's the next setting. So we have max accumulation, or ACDist, maximum accumulation distribution. This is a really cool setting, and this is, while it's an old setting, it has a different function in this build. So what we're doing now is that if we find an area of supply or demand that exceeds 3 periods of either distribution or of accumulation, it's going to automatically enable Slingshot Mode. Okay, so it's going to put, instead of this this area just here being like this, which it should have been, because there's a lot of noise in here, it says, you know what, price is going to move through this really easy, so we're going to put it above the area of supply, like that. Okay, price went up into it and then it went down. So this is what you'll very often see when there's a whole lot of distribution or accumulation in an area of value. Okay, so that's a really cool feature. All right, we have this one too, start bar. So where do we start the analysis? I want to go 3 bars back. So this is the open bar. This doesn't count. So 1, 2, 3. It starts at this bar and it goes this number of periods back. Okay, you can change that to whatever. If this is set to 0, it uses all visible candles on the chart. If I just go like that, enable that. Okay, it'll look at all visible candles on the chart. But one thing that I've noticed that is super interesting is this. When an area of supply or demand has been formed and price moves away from it very, very quickly, if price comes back to it within 20 candles, the likelihood of that trade working goes up by 40%. Goes up by 40%. So if we have a likelihood of a trade working by, let's say, 50% likelihood of a trade working, if the trade is triggered within 20 periods, we can add an additional, actually almost 40%, about 37, 38% on top of that. So we're up at about 80, in the high 80% likelihood of that trade working. And this is just something that I've observed based on an analysis of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trades. So this is a really interesting setting to pay attention to. So if you're super conservative, you only want to take the best ones, then set this to like 10 and rarely over 20. If you feel comfortable making these decisions by yourself, then you can put it on 0 and you can make the decisions yourself. But if you put this on a low value like this, like 8, well, then you have, the likelihood of these trades working out goes up tremendously. Okay, origin only supply and demand. Set this to false. This is probably going to go out in a future release. So I wouldn't focus, just leave this turned off for the time being. Allow multiple tests. So, we had this area here. Let's assume that price tested it. But if price didn't go into it that far, would we like to trade that area again? Maybe, maybe not. If it's set to true, then we will allow that. If we set it to false, then it will not. Okay, if we have this one here, number of periods until expiration, this tells us how many periods we want the order, the unfilled order, to be valid for. 34 means that if it's a 4-hour trade taken on the 4-hour chart, it'll last for 34 times 4 hours. Once that period expires, passes, then the order will expire. And then we have rectangle width. This is the thickness of the line that it finds on the chart, and the other stuff here. We have the trend. What does the trend mean? Well, the trend means that we want to look for swing points that are valid by we want 2 respected lows and highs on either side of a swing, up to 8 on either side of a swing. Okay, so just let me draw that so that makes sense. So if we have a candle here, a swing high here, in the current setting here, it'll look for at least 3 on either side, and it will continue to look for an additional 5. So it'll start on 8 and it'll go down to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so this, it likes this because it was respected, okay, between 8 and 3 periods, if that makes sense. Hope that wasn't too confusing. But that's what it's looking for. It's looking for respect of a high or a low between 8 and 5 periods. If it finds that, then this is where it'll attach a line for a trend line. Okay. All right, and then we have the colors. Then we have this here. Okay, which is the magic number. Okay, cool. So I mean that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. So if we just look about how we could potentially use this, what I'll do is I'll just go to a, let's find something it doesn't really have, maybe anything. So we are on the 1 hour chart, but there are no white boxes here. Actually, there's one just up here. So let's go here, because then we have 4 hour area. And notice that nothing is happening. And the reason nothing is happening is because I just changed it. It's because of this value that we talked about. Start bar, last bar. Okay, it was set to a pretty low value. So for example, 8. So it's only going to look at 8 periods back. If you go like this, you really zoom out like this, and it'll only look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's not going to find this one up here. But if we go to the half an hour chart, maybe it will. If this is within 8 periods, 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, this should trigger. Yes, okay, so it only goes 8 hours back. So now, if we come back to this area within 8 periods, that is a smoke and trade. Okay, so I'm just going to flick that on. This is how I'm using it. Let me go like this, you guys can see. I'm just going to go like this. I'm just going to take that trade. Boom, like that. Okay. Make sure you get that right. Yes, 85 bucks. Okay, so we're risking 85 bucks for a potential of winning another $85. Okay, and also notice that the accumulation and distribution, it's changed just a little bit, and so the new engine looks at several different criteria when qualifying accumulation and distribution. It's looking for the shape of the candles. It's looking for like the behavior of price inside the candles, and it's looking for it's looking for the family relationship between these candles. So if the open and close of this candle is within the range of the previous, then these two are connected. But even though this one and this one are not connected, this is still like a relatively mild candle relative to this one and relative to this one here. And so it's going to say, you know, this candle is cool, we want it to be part of our family. Okay, and so it's going to do that. But you can see that this candle kind of fell outside the realm. Sorry, this one did here. This one is a part of it. But this one fell. Okay, and so here we have distribution, 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 stop. Okay, and so these 1, 2, 3, 4, these are in some way related. So we want these to be a part of this area of distribution. Okay, so we go to another asset. Let's go to, I don't know, gold. See what's going on there. Okay, so here we have, this is the downward sloping trend line. See, this is on a small time frame, so we are on the 30-minute chart, but this is a 15-minute area, so we'll have to go to the 15-minute chart to see that. Yeah, here it is. We'll probably see that just here. Okay, so now, because, I mean, this would have been a beautiful trade even if this box was drawn down here, because ideally the box would have been drawn, or initially it was drawn like that, not like that, so we would have got filled right here. But because there's a lot of distribution, the algo said, I want to be above that. Okay, and so it put the box above, which is why we have the box above. And so as a result of putting a low value in the max accumulation distribution, you might miss out on some entries, but you know what? That's fine, because the entries that you do get are going to be sweet. And so I would be more than happy to wait for those. Okay, we had another one here. This is a 5-minute entry right here. This was a very small, this was an area of accumulation that was less than, was 3 periods or less, and that filled beautifully, and then we and we kind of went up to here, so we had a lovely trade on that one there. The algo would have found that as well beautifully. Okay, let's have a look at one more example. Doesn't really matter, Euro USD. We already have one there. Let's go to the pound. Okay, so let's have a look on this. Let's go on the 4-hour chart. Oh, we already have one. Let's just kill this. Okay, so now the algo will say, oh, we have an area here. But we are, remember that the settings of my supply and demand software is slightly different. I have this. So I'm looking at the current time frame, which is 0, plus the current time frame minus 1, which is the 1 hour, plus the current time frame plus 1, which is the daily. So on this chart on the left, which is the supply and demand software, even though we're on the 4-hour chart, I'm also seeing hourly supply and demand and daily supply and demand. Okay, but we can't see that because the buy and the sell zone is only looking on the current time frame. Okay, and because we probably have a low value here, where is it? Where is it? Start here. Last bar, we've got to turn this off, remember? So I'm also just showing you where a lot of the questions might come up. Why am I not seeing any boxes? It's because there are a couple of settings that might not be. Now we'll see this one here, this blue one just here. It's because before we were limiting it to 8 candles. We go up to the daily chart, see if there's anything there. Maybe there's something up around here, maybe. No, there's nothing there. If we go down to the 15-minute chart, maybe. There's a lot of stuff here, so probably above. Yeah, so you can see here that because there's a lot of sideways price movement here, we want to be above that. And so the algo said, cool, let's put the entry at the upper side of this area of distribution, which is essentially Slingshot. It reacted beautifully off this 5-minute area of demand just down here, and we're having a bit of a bounce. Okay, so if I like that, I simply auto trade on, and it'll open the trade with all of the information that we have specified in the risk. And so always keep in mind here that we have a daily, we're in the daily buy zone. What does that mean? That means that selling should be done very, very carefully. Okay, but we are not in any, we are down zone on the monthly and the weekly, daily, and the 4-hour. So we are still keen on moving lower, and so we can sell with confidence. But if we take a loss here, that means that maybe it's time to start to buy. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to stop now. But if you have any questions about this software, please post them in the Discord channel or in the comments below this video, and I will get to them. And I'm currently just finishing updating the supply and demand software so that all of the same settings will be built into the supply and demand software. I just wanted to get this the buy and sell zone algo trader out before, because this has been on my desk for quite some time. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy this this new product. It's pretty sweet, and I think that you should find yourself doing much better with this version than you did with the previous version. Okay, thanks for watching. Speak to you soon.